When one of the most powerful men in the world walks across a room to shake your hand, you shake it. That is just what you do. Everyone knows it. Everyone follows that rule. Because when Elon Musk, the richest person on the planet, the man who owns rockets and electric cars and the biggest social media platform in the world, walks toward you with his hand out and a smile on his face, in a room full of billionaires who are all watching, you reach out your hand and you shake it. Everyone does, except one man. It happened on July 12, 2023, inside a grand ballroom in Sun Valley, Idaho. The room was full of the most powerful people on Earth: CEOs, billionaires, media moguls, people who could buy and sell entire companies before breakfast. The chandeliers were bright. The floors were polished. Outside the windows, enormous mountains rose up gold and green against the evening sky. Elon Musk walked across that room like he owned it, because in rooms like that one, he basically did. People turned their heads when he passed. Some smiled, some whispered. Some tried not to stare, and then stared anyway. He was walking toward one man, a man named Darian Voss, a self-made billionaire from Flint, Michigan, who had built his entire fortune from nothing. A man who was standing near the far wall, holding a glass of water he hadn't touched once, completely still, in a way that didn't look calm at all. It looked like a man carrying something very heavy and working very hard not to let it show. Elon Musk stopped in front of him. He smiled his easy smile. He put out his hand, and Darian Voss looked at that hand. And he looked at it for so long that the two men nearby stopped talking. A woman across the room tilted her head. A journalist standing near the bar raised her phone and pressed record without fully understanding why. Then Darian looked up. His eyes met Elon Musk's eyes directly, and he turned and walked away. Just like that. No words, no explanation, no anger on his face, nothing dramatic at all. He simply turned his back on the most powerful hand in that room and walked away, like he had made this decision a long time ago, and was only now carrying it out. The room went completely silent. Within hours, a 12-second video of that moment was posted online. By morning, 14 million people had watched it. The internet exploded. Everyone had a theory. Was it a business war? Was it political? Was it personal? 6,000 articles were written in 24 hours trying to explain what had happened. Every single one of them was wrong, because none of them knew about the letter. A 4-page handwritten letter sitting folded in the inside pocket of Darian's jacket at that exact moment. A letter he had read every single morning for the past 8 months. A letter written in careful blue ink by someone who was no longer alive to see any of this. None of them knew about the 89 days. None of them knew about the laptop that went dark. None of them knew about the boy. And none of them had any idea that within 24 hours of that refused handshake, something would happen quietly and privately between these two men that nobody saw coming. Something that would move $25 million. And something that would change thousands of lives. Something that started with the worst moment of a father's life and became the most important thing he ever built. This is not a story about two billionaires fighting. This is a story about a father and a son, and the 9 words that changed everything. Watch this video all the way to the end, because the truth behind those 12 seconds is something nobody guessed. And the moment you find out what was really in that jacket pocket, everything you thought you understood about what happened in that ballroom is going to completely change. The room went quiet. Not slowly, not gently. All at once. like someone had reached into the air and pulled the sound right out of it. 143 of the most powerful people on Earth were standing inside the grand ballroom of the Sun Valley Lodge in Sun Valley, Idaho. The floors were polished wood, shined so bright you could almost see your face in them. The chandeliers overhead blazed with warm light. Outside the tall windows, the mountains rose up gold and green in the July evening sky, enormous and ancient and completely unbothered by anything happening below them. It was July 12th, 2023. People called this place Summer Camp for Billionaires. Every July, the most powerful figures in business, technology, and media flew into this small Idaho mountain town for the Allen & Company Sun Valley Conference. The guest list read like a who's who of the world. Media owners, bank chiefs, tech founders, sports team owners, people who could buy and sell companies the way ordinary people buy and sell cars. The deals made here, sometimes over breakfast, sometimes on hiking trails, sometimes standing near the bar with a glass of something expensive. Those deals moved the world. But there was nothing childlike about what happened next. And there was no deal being made. Elon Musk walked across the room. He moved the way very powerful people sometimes do. Like the space around him already belonged to him, and the air itself stepped aside. He was wearing a dark blazer. His shoulders were broad. His face carried the easy, half-bored expression of a man who had been the most important person in every room he had ever entered and had simply come to expect it. People turned their heads as he passed. Some smiled wide and hopeful. Some leaned toward their companions and whispered. Some pretended hard not to look, and then looked anyway the moment he passed them. He was heading toward one man, Darian Voss. Darian was standing near the far wall, holding a glass of sparkling water he had not touched once. He was 54 years old. Not the tallest man in the room, not the loudest. He was lean and still, dressed in a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly. And he had the kind of stillness about him that didn't come from being relaxed. It came from carrying something very heavy for a very long time, and learning to carry it without letting it show. Darian Voss was worth $11 billion. He had built every cent of it himself. Truly himself, starting from nothing. He had grown up near the train tracks in Flint, Michigan, in a house where his parents worked 2 jobs between them and still had to choose, some months, between fixing the car and paying the heating bill. He had earned his way out through brilliance and stubbornness and years of working while other people slept. His company, Novapulse Energy, made the batteries that powered 1 in every 4 electric vehicles sold across North America. He was, by every measure, the people in this room used to measure a man, a success. But success is not the same as being okay. And Darian Voss was not okay. Elon Musk stopped in front of him. He smiled, the confident, easy smile of a man who has never been refused in a room like this, and he extended his hand. It was a simple gesture, ordinary, the kind of thing that happens 1,000 times a day in rooms like this one, without anyone thinking twice about it. Darian Voss looked at the hand. He looked at it for a long moment. Long enough that the 2 men standing nearby stopped mid-sentence. Long enough that a woman across the room slowly tilted her head. Long enough that the silence expanded outward from the 2 of them like ripples moving across still water. Then Darian looked up. His dark eyes met Elon Musk's eyes directly. There was no anger in his face, no contempt, no heat at all. There was something quieter, and somehow worse. The expression of a man who had made a decision a long time ago, and was only now, in this bright and crowded room, carrying it out. He said nothing. He did not reach out his hand. He did not nod. He did not smile. He turned and walked away. The sound came back to the room slowly after that, like water filling a bowl. People went back to their conversations. See, they laughed a little too hard at things that weren't quite funny. They looked at their drinks. They did everything people do when they have witnessed something they don't quite understand and aren't sure they should have seen. Near the bar, a 31-year-old Bloomberg journalist named Priya Osei lowered her phone. She had raised it almost without thinking. Some instinct she had built over 4 years of watching powerful people in rooms like this one. An instinct that told her when something was real. She looked down at her screen. 12 seconds of video. She would spend the next 2 hours deciding what to do with it. She would spend the next 6 months learning what it actually meant. Because the 12 seconds showed everything except the one thing that mattered. It showed a hand extended and refused. It showed a man turning away. And it showed the stunned stillness of a room full of people who thought they had seen a power move, a business war, a very public statement. Not one of them understood that what they had actually seen was a father. A father standing in a glittering room with a folded letter in the inside pocket of his jacket. A letter written by a 22-year-old boy who was no longer alive to see any of this. That letter was the reason for everything. And nobody in that room knew it yet. But to understand why Darian Voss walked away from the most powerful hand in that ballroom, you first have to understand where Darian Voss came from. Not the version in the press releases. Not the profile in Forbes from 2018, with the photograph of him standing in front of a Nova Pulse battery facility in a hard hat, looking serious and successful. The real version, and the one that started before any of that, in a small house near the train tracks on the east side of Flint, Michigan, where the winters were long and the heating bills were real, and nobody was handing anybody anything. He was born in 1969. His mother, Celestine Voss, worked the early morning shift at a diner on Saginaw Street. She left the house at 4:45 a.m. every day, before the sun came up, and she came home smelling like maple syrup and dish soap and exhaustion. She never complained. Not once. Not in a way her children heard. She sang instead. Old gospel songs, low and quiet, while she washed the dinner dishes after her shift ended and her second shift at home began. His father, Renford Voss, worked at an auto parts factory during the day and stocked shelves at a grocery store on Friday nights. He had large, uncareful hands and a way of looking at a broken thing, a busted bicycle chain, a leaking pipe under the sink, like he was reading it, figuring out its secret, before he quietly fixed it without making a fuss. Darian watched his father's hands his whole childhood. He learned from them without knowing he was learning. They were not poor in a dramatic way that made the news. They were poor in the quiet, grinding way that most people never write about. The way that wears families down slowly, over years, like water wearing down stone. The way you feel it in the small decisions. Which bill gets paid first? Whether the shoes can last another winter? Whether you mention the field trip form or just quietly pretend it never came home. Darian was the middle child of 3. His older sister, Tamara, became a 6th-grade teacher in Detroit and was, by all accounts, extraordinary at it. His younger brother, Kwame, had a harder road. Prison at 22 for a mistake made in a moment that the rest of his life did not deserve to be defined by. Kwame came out changed in the best possible way and now ran a youth mentorship program in Detroit that had helped over 3,000 young men find their footing. The Voss family, it turned out, was full of people who built things for other people. They just each found a different material to build with. Darian built with energy. He was always building something, even as a small boy. toy cars from rubber bands and cardboard, a little windmill from paper cups, and a pencil stuck through a spool of thread. He read everything the Flint Public Library had on electricity and circuits, and how power moved through things. At 11 years old, he built a battery from copper wire, a zinc nail, and a lemon, something he had read about in a library book and could not stop thinking about until he had tried it himself. The lemon battery worked. It powered a small flashlight bulb for 40 seconds. 40 seconds of weak, warm light sitting in the palm of his hand in his mother's kitchen while she watched over her shoulder from the stove, smiling like she already knew this was the beginning of something. Darian remembered those 40 seconds for the rest of his life. He understood something in that moment, something he would spend his entire career trying to put into bigger and better words. Energy, he knew even at 11, was the thing that made every other thing possible. Not money, not connections, not luck. Energy was the foundation. Everything else was built on top of it. And he earned a scholarship to the University of Michigan, electrical engineering. He slept 4 hours a night and spent the rest studying, working part-time at a campus lab, and writing letters home to his mother that she kept in a shoebox under her bed until the day she died. He graduated with honors in 1991 and took a job at General Motors, where he spent 9 careful years learning how real batteries were made at scale. And more importantly, learning exactly why most of them weren't good enough and never would be, until someone thought about the problem differently. In 2000, he left GM with $30,000 in savings, a notebook crammed with ideas written in his father's careful handwriting style, and a wife named Theola. Theola Voss, born Theola Adeyemi in Lagos, Nigeria, had come to Michigan on a graduate scholarship in biochemistry. She was the sharpest person Darian had ever met, and also the funniest, which was a combination he had not known was possible until her. She had a laugh that arrived suddenly and completely, like she was always just slightly surprised by how funny things turned out to be. She believed in him the way very few people ever believe in another person, not carefully, not with conditions, but entirely. They started Novapulse Energy in the garage of a rented house in Ann Arbor in the spring of 2000. The early years were brutal in every way that matters. No investors, no safety net. Darian took consulting jobs on the side to pay the rent. Theola worked as a lab researcher at the University of Michigan during the day and came home to their newborn son in the evenings, nursing him on the couch while Darian ran calculations at the kitchen table across the room. The baby was born in February of 2001. He came into the world screaming, which Theola said was a very good sign. It meant he had a lot to say. She named him Marcus. She was right about everything, as usual. Marcus Voss came into the world with opinions. He had them early, and he had them loudly, and he was never particularly shy about sharing them. At 3 years old, he told Darian that the scrambled eggs were too dry. At 5, he informed his kindergarten teacher that the alphabet song had a rhythm problem in the middle section. At 7, he sat next to Theola at the kitchen table and watched her work through a biochemistry problem in her notebook, and asked questions, one after another, and for 45 straight minutes until she finally laughed, and closed the notebook and said, "Marcus, baby, where does it end with you?" He thought about this seriously. Then he said, "I don't think it does." He was right about that too. Growing up, Marcus was the kind of child that teachers either loved completely or found quietly exhausting. Sometimes both at the same time, sometimes within the same week. He was not difficult. He was not disruptive. He simply could not stop thinking out loud. And in a world that often asked children to be quiet and receive information rather than wrestle with it, Marcus was always wrestling. What he loved most, from the time he was 9 years old, was code. Darian had brought home an old laptop from the Nova Pulse office, a chunky, slow machine that took 3 minutes to start up and made a sound like a small animal was trapped inside it. He had intended to wipe it and donate it. Marcus found it first. Within a week, the boy had taught himself basic HTML from a library book and built a web page about African wild dogs, which were, at the time, his greatest passion. The web page was terrible. The font was bright red on a dark blue background. The layout was chaotic. But it worked. It existed in the world when it had not existed before. Marcus had made a thing out of nothing, and something about that, the specific feeling of making a thing exist that had not existed, hooked into him deep and never let go. Viola watched all of this and said nothing except one evening to Darian. He got the building from you. He got the talking from me. God help everyone. By high school, Marcus was writing code the way some people write music, with a natural feel for rhythm and structure, and the small, elegant choices that separate something that merely works from something that sings. His computer science teacher at Pioneer High School in Ann Arbor, a man named Mr. Elias Croft, who had a master's degree from Carnegie Mellon and had seen a lot of talented students in 20 years, pulled Darian aside at a parent-teacher conference in Marcus's junior year. "I don't say this lightly," Mr. Croft said, "and I say it to very few families. Your son is genuinely exceptional, not in a he-works-hard way, in a once-every-few-years way. You need to make sure he has every door open to him." Darian drove home from that conference and sat in his car in the driveway for 10 minutes before going inside. And he thought about every soccer game he had missed, every school play he had arrived late to, every bedtime that Viola had handled alone because he was on a call or on a flight or sitting in a conference room 3 states away, trying to build something that would make their lives secure. He wondered if the price of the thing he had built was being properly counted. Then he went inside and told Viola what the teacher had said. She put down her book and looked at him with her steady eyes and said, "I know. I've always known." And then she smiled the smile that was only ever his, private and warm, and a little bit like the sun coming from behind something. Marcus got into Stanford University in the spring of 2019. He was 17 years old. He called his grandmother Celestine from the kitchen the moment the email arrived. And Celestine cried so hard on the phone that Marcus spent 10 minutes reassuring her, telling her it was okay, telling her he was happy, which made her cry harder. He started in the fall of 2019. He loved it immediately, fiercely, and without reservation. The way young people love things when they arrive somewhere that finally makes sense of them. Then came November 2019. Viola found a lump, small, discovered by accident during a routine check. She told Darian on a Tuesday evening after dinner, in the kitchen, quietly, the way she always delivered difficult things. Without drama, without performance, just directly. Like she was handing him something heavy and trusting him to hold it. He held it. He did everything a man with his resources could do. The best oncologists at the MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, one of the finest cancer hospitals in the world, for second opinions and third opinions and every available option. He flew with her to appointments. He sat next to her hospital bed with his hand in hers and told her everything he had not said enough over the 20 years they had been building a life together. She told him to stop apologizing and just stay. So he stayed. Marcus came home every break. He sat with his mother for hours, talking, always talking, filling the house with stories and questions, and the specific bright noise of himself that Theola had always said was her favorite sound in the world. He held her hand. He made her laugh, even in the hard months when laughing was something that took effort. He had gotten her laugh, the one that arrived suddenly, like a surprise. When it came out of him, it made her face change completely. The cancer progressed. It fought back against everything they threw at it with a patience and determination that felt almost personal. By the winter of 2020, it had spread. By January 2021, the doctors spoke in different language. The language that tells you the fight has changed its shape. Theola Voss died on March 4th, 2021. She was 51 years old. She died at 7 in the morning, with gray winter light coming through the hospital window, and Darian on one side of her and Marcus on the other. Both of them holding her hands. Both of them holding on. The way you hold something when you know that the holding is all you have left, and that it will not be enough, and that you will hold on anyway with everything in you until the very last second. The house in Ann Arbor was very quiet after that. Darian did not speak for 3 days, not out of choice. The words were simply gone. Marcus spoke for both of them. He sat with his father and talked about her. Story after story, small memory after small memory. The way she mispronounced certain American foods on purpose because it made Darian laugh. The time she had argued with a chemistry professor and been absolutely correct. The Sunday mornings she made jollof rice, and the whole house smelled like something warm and permanent. He talked until both of them were laughing and crying at the same time, which was exactly what grief feels like when it is being carried by people who love each other. This was Marcus. He processed the world by talking about it, by turning it into language and offering that language to the people he loved. It was his most extraordinary gift and the most honest thing about him. He went back to Stanford. He finished his degree. He graduated in June 2022 in the bright California sunshine, and Darian flew out for the ceremony and sat in the bleachers and watched his son walk across that stage and felt something complicated and enormous. Pride and grief and love and the strange weight of a future that would have to be built without Theola in it. Marcus called his grandmother Celestine from the parking lot afterward. She cried again. He spent 10 minutes reassuring her again. He winked at Darian while he did it. Then in August of 2022, the phone call came. The one from Twitter. The one that offered Marcus the job that he had not dared to let himself fully want. And because wanting things that big still felt dangerous to a boy who had just watched the biggest thing in his world disappear. He took it anyway. He said yes before the call was finished. And for 89 days, Marcus Voss was exactly where he had always been going. He worked in Twitter's San Francisco headquarters at 1355 Market Street, a building that had once been a furniture mart and had been transformed into one of the most recognized tech offices in the world. High ceilings, open floors, a rooftop with a view of the city that stretched all the way to the water on clear days. Marcus sent his father photos of that rooftop constantly. Morning light hitting the bay. The city spread out below like a circuit board someone had designed with care. He sent voice memos too. Long ones. 10, 12, sometimes 15 minutes. I recorded on his evening walk home, his voice fast and bright, the way it got when his brain was running at full speed. He talked about the infrastructure problems he was solving, about the colleagues he was learning from, about the specific satisfying feeling of writing a piece of code that made something faster, cleaner, more true. One memo, recorded on a Tuesday evening in October 2022, he talked about Theola. "Dad," he said. "I think this is it. I think this is the thing I was made for." Mom would have loved this place. She would have asked 100 questions and made everyone laugh within 5 minutes. I wish she could see this. Darian saved that memo. He listened to it so many times in the months that followed that he had every word memorized, including the exact way Marcus's voice lifted slightly on the word laugh, and the way it always did when he talked about her. On October 27, 2022, Elon Musk completed his purchase of Twitter for $44 billion. What came next has been written about in newspapers, in books, in congressional hearings, and business school case studies. Within days, Musk fired Twitter's senior leadership. Within 2 weeks, he sent a company-wide email giving every employee a stark choice: commit to working what he described as long hours at high intensity in the new Twitter, or accept 3 months of severance pay and walk away. On November 4, 2022, roughly 50% of Twitter's global workforce was laid off, approximately 3,700 people. The notification came by email. Employees found out they no longer had jobs when their work laptops went gray and their building access badges stopped working. No conversations, no warnings, no one looking them in the face. Marcus Voss was among those 3,700 people. He had been at his dream job for 89 days. He found out at 6:47 in the morning when his laptop screen went gray, and a small notification told him his access had been revoked. He stared at the screen for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone. He called Darian at 7:04 a.m. "Dad," he said, just that one word. But Darian had known his son's voice for 21 years. Every register of it, every color. He knew what that single word contained. "I'm here," Darian said immediately. "I'm right here." They talked for 2 hours. Darian said everything a father says. That it was not Marcus's fault, that he was extraordinary, that Twitter's loss was the greatest mistake any company could make, that the right door would open because doors always opened for people like Marcus. He said it all, and he meant every word, and Marcus listened and said he understood and said he was going to be okay. He was not okay. But neither of them knew the full shape of that yet. What Darian did not know, could not have known, sitting on the edge of his bed in Ann Arbor at 7 in the morning, was that the laptop going dark was not just a job loss. For Marcus, who had lost his mother 18 months earlier and had packed that grief carefully away inside himself and gone back to Stanford and kept moving forward the way his father had taught him to keep moving forward, the screen going gray was something else entirely. It was a door slamming shut in the dark. And Marcus, already standing somewhere very dark, you heard the sound and believed something that was not true. He believed it was the only door there was. He moved back to Michigan in December 2022. Darian was glad to have him home in the way that parents are glad when their children return. Not because anything is fixed, but because at least you can see them. At least you can make breakfast. At least you can hear them moving around in the next room and know they are still there. Darian made breakfast every morning. Eggs the way Marcus liked them. Not too dry, a lesson learned 20 years earlier and never forgotten. He was present in the way he had not always been when Theola was alive. He showed up. He sat at the table. He asked questions and listened to the answers instead of half listening with one eye on his phone. Marcus seemed okay. He talked about a new coding project. And he was applying to other companies. He saw a therapist, a woman named Dr. Fenella Bright, whose small, warm office was on the second floor of a building on Liberty Street in downtown Ann Arbor. He went twice in January. He did not go back in February. He He told Darian the sessions were helpful, but that he felt better now and didn't think he needed to keep going. Darian believed him. He believed him because Marcus was talking. He was eating. He was laughing sometimes. That sudden Theola laugh, arriving without warning, filling whatever room it landed in. Darian held onto those laughs the way a man holds onto a rope in moving water. He told himself they were evidence of something solid. The last week of February was the week before the 2-year anniversary of Theola's death. Darian noticed Marcus growing quieter. Oh, he told himself it was grief. The predictable, calendar-shaped grief that hits hardest around anniversaries. He told himself it would pass. He stayed close. He suggested they drive up to Traverse City for the weekend. Just the two of them. Somewhere Theola had loved. Marcus said maybe next weekend. There was no next weekend. On February 28, 2023, Marcus Voss died by suicide in his childhood bedroom in the house near Ann Arbor where his mother had once stood at the kitchen stove singing gospel songs in the early morning dark. He was 22 years old. He left a letter. Darian found it. He read it standing in the doorway of Marcus's room, still in his pajamas, in the gray morning light of the last day of February. He read it once. Then he folded it along its original creases. 4 careful folds, and the same way Marcus had always folded things, precisely, as if neatness was a form of respect. And he put it in the inside pocket of his jacket. He wore a different jacket to the funeral, but he transferred the letter. He had carried it every single day since. The grief that followed was not loud. Darian was not a man who fell apart in front of people. He was a man who had learned, from a childhood of watching his parents absorb hard things quietly, that the world does not pause for your pain. You carry it. You keep moving. You build. He went back to work in April 2023. He sat in meetings and signed documents and took calls and said all the right things to all the right people. His board saw a man who had suffered a tremendous loss and was handling it with extraordinary dignity. What they saw was the outside. Inside, Darian Voss was made entirely of ash. He was a hollow man walking through a full world, carrying a letter in his jacket and a voice memo on his phone, and the memory of a 21-year-old boy saying, "I think this is the thing I was made for," on a Tuesday evening in October, with the whole city of San Francisco spread out behind him like a promise. When the invitation to Sun Valley arrived, he almost threw it away. He didn't. He went because staying home felt worse. He went because the house was too quiet. He went because he had not yet figured out what else to do with himself and his money, and the 9 words his son had written near the end of a 4-page letter. He went with the letter in his pocket. He was standing near the far wall of the grand ballroom, holding a glass of sparkling water he had not touched, and when Elon Musk began walking across the room toward him. And in the 10 seconds it took Musk to close the distance between them, Darian Voss made the only decision that felt honest. He was done making things easy for people who had made nothing easy for his son. Priya Ose had been standing near the bar when it happened. She was 31 years old, 4 years into her career at Bloomberg, and she had developed the particular skill that good journalists develop over time: the ability to watch a room the way a doctor watches a patient, looking not at what was obvious, but at what was underneath. The slight tension in a shoulder, the direction of a gaze, the small involuntary things that people do when they are feeling something they haven't decided yet to show. She had been watching Elon Musk move through the ballroom when something in the geometry of where he was heading made her look toward the far wall. She found Darian Voss standing there. She had interviewed him once before, 2 years earlier, a piece on Nova Pulse's battery technology. And she remembered him as a man who chose his words carefully and gave away nothing he hadn't decided to give. Precise. Guarded. The kind of person who always seemed to know exactly how much of himself he was sharing. She raised her phone almost before she understood why. 12 seconds. She watched them back immediately, right there at the bar, with the noise of the room around her. She watched them 5 times in a row, each time looking at something different. The first time she watched Musk. The second time she watched Darian. The third time she watched the space between them. The extended hand hanging in the air between two men, like a question that was not going to be answered. The fourth time she watched Darian's face. The fifth time she watched his eyes. Something in his eyes stopped her completely. It was not anger. She had seen powerful men angry in rooms like this. The tight jaw, the hot color at the collar, the energy that radiated outward like heat from something burning. This was not that. What she saw in Darian Voss's eyes in those 12 seconds was something she did not have an immediate word for. It took her the entire walk back to her hotel room to find it. Grief. That was what she had seen. Not rage, not arrogance, not a calculated power play by a billionaire trying to make a statement. She had seen grief, standing upright in a suit, doing the only thing it knew how to do. She sat on the edge of her bed and called her editor, Raphael Drummond, in New York. It was nearly 11 o'clock at night, but Raphael answered on the second ring the way good editors always answer, like they have been waiting for exactly this call. She described the 12 seconds carefully. She did not tell him what she thought she had seen in Darian's eyes. She was a careful journalist, and she knew the difference between what she could prove and what she felt. She told him only the facts. What she had filmed, what she had witnessed, what 2 other attendees she had already texted had confirmed. Raphael told her to write it up and post it. She spent 2 hours on 400 words. She was precise and clean and careful. She described what happened without speculating about why. So she let the video speak for itself. She posted it on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter, now owned by the man standing at the center of those 12 seconds, at 11:47 p.m. Mountain Time. By midnight, it had 80,000 views. By 1 in the morning, 300,000. By 3 in the morning, it was the top trending topic in the United States, the United Kingdom, and Australia. By the time Darian Voss woke up the following morning, 14 million people had watched him refuse to shake Elon Musk's hand. The internet, faced with something it could not explain, did what it always does. It made up explanations. The first and most widely shared theory was business. People with large followings pointed to the fact that Tesla and Novapulse had been in quiet preliminary discussions about a battery supply partnership in mid-2022. And those discussions had ended abruptly in November of that year. The same month, Musk completed the Twitter acquisition and immediately set about dismantling everything inside it. The theory wrote itself cleanly. Darian was furious about the collapsed deal. The handshake refusal was a declaration of corporate war, conducted in the most expensive room available. Business journalists loved this version. It fit neatly into the language they used every day. They wrote detailed pieces about the EV battery supply market, about Tesla's push to develop batteries entirely in-house, about what Novapulse stood to gain or lose, depending on how this public confrontation played out in boardrooms across Silicon Valley. The second theory was political. Elon Musk had changed, publicly and dramatically, in the years since his Twitter purchase. He had made statements, amplified accounts, and taken positions that had cost him admirers who had once considered him a visionary. Several prominent commentators framed Darian's refusal as a principled act. A man of substance refusing to normalize someone he found troubling. These pieces were shared hundreds of thousands of times by people who wanted the story to be about values. The third theory was purely personal. An anonymous account posted that they had inside information about a bitter private argument between Darian and Musk at a technology conference in 2021. There had been no such argument. The account had been created 4 days earlier and had 11 followers. None of that mattered. The post was shared over 200,000 times before it was taken down. By morning, over 6,000 articles, posts, videos, and opinion pieces had been published about 12 seconds of footage filmed on a phone near a bar in Idaho. Not one of them was right. Not one of them mentioned a boy named Marcus. Not one of them mentioned a letter folded into 4 careful creases, riding in the inside pocket of a charcoal suit jacket, in a hotel room on the 4th floor of the Sun Valley Lodge, where a man who had not slept sat in a chair by the window and watched the mountains and read his dead son's words in the first pale light of morning. Darian's phone had been ringing since before 6. He knew without looking who was calling. His assistant, Bianca. His PR team. His board members. Possibly journalists who had somehow gotten his personal number, which people with enough resources and enough motivation always eventually did. But he had placed the phone face down on the desk when the calls started, and he had not touched it since. He sat in the chair by the window, with the letter open in both hands, and the mountains outside enormous and quiet, and completely unchanged by anything the internet was doing this morning. He read the letter the way he read it every morning, slowly, each word separately, like he was meeting them one at a time. He had read it so many times that he could have recited it from memory in the dark. He read it anyway. He read it because Marcus had held this paper. Marcus's hand had moved across this page. The ink was his son's pressure on the world, and reading it was the closest thing Darian had to hearing his voice now that the voice memos had become too painful to open. He folded it back along its 4 creases, and he placed it in his jacket pocket. Then he stood up, washed his face, and went down to breakfast. What Elon Musk knew about Darian Voss that morning was limited and largely professional. He knew Nova Pulse. He knew the battery technology. Tesla's own engineering team had reviewed it during those preliminary supply discussions in 2022 and rated it seriously competitive. He knew Darian's net worth, his board positions, his general standing in the EV industry. He knew the sort of things that powerful people know about other powerful people in their orbit. A comprehensive surface, nothing underneath. He did not know about Marcus. He found out at approximately 11:15 a.m. on July 13, 2023, in the way he found out many things. Through the quiet efficiency of the people around him who were paid to know everything before he needed to know it. To a member of his communications team, a 28-year-old named Theodore Garza, who was exceptionally good at his job and had learned early that the most important information was always in the personal section, placed a single-page document on the table in front of Musk. It was a brief on Darian Voss. Standard format: company history, net worth, notable positions, relevant relationships, past public statements. And then, near the bottom of the page, a section marked Personal. Theodore had hesitated before including it. He was not entirely sure it was relevant. He included it because he had been doing this job long enough to know that when powerful people did inexplicable things in public, the explanation was almost always in the personal section. The entry read, Darian Voss lost his wife, Theola Voss, to breast cancer on March 4, 2021. His son, Marcus Voss, a software engineer, was among the employees laid off from Twitter in November 2022 following the acquisition. Marcus Voss died by suicide on February 28, 2023. He was 22 years old. Elon Musk read it once. He set the page down. He read it again. Then he did something that Theodore Garza, who had been in the room for dozens of moments like this one, moments when difficult information landed in front of a man who processed difficult information faster than almost anyone alive, had not seen him do before. He sat completely still, not thinking still, the focused stillness of a man processing data. Different from that, the stillness of a person who has just understood something and is feeling the full weight of it before deciding what to do next. It lasted perhaps 30 seconds, and it felt much longer to the two people in the room with him. He picked up his phone. He made a call. The call lasted 47 minutes, which was extraordinary for a man whose average call length his assistant had once calculated at under 6 minutes. Nobody in his team knew who he called. The door was closed. His face, when he came out, was unreadable in a way that was different from his usual unreadability. He sat down and wrote 3 things. The first was the post on X, the brief, dismissive comment about germaphobes that the internet immediately read as cool arrogance. It was not arrogance. It was a man buying himself time while he figured out what the right thing to do was, which was something he did not always stop to figure out, but was stopping to figure out now. And the second was a message to Theodore Garza. I need the internal timeline of the November 2022 layoffs, not the public version. The actual sequence of decisions. Who made them? When? How the communication was handled? What the alternatives were? The third thing he wrote was by hand, on a piece of Sun Valley Lodge Hotel stationery. He wrote for roughly 20 minutes, which meant it was either very short and required a great deal of revision, or it was something he needed to approach slowly. He folded it. He put it in his jacket. 2 men in 2 separate rooms in Sun Valley, Idaho, each carrying a folded piece of paper. One carrying a son's last words. One carrying something he had not yet decided how to deliver. At 2 in the afternoon, the Musk's personal assistant contacted Bianca Foley and requested a private meeting between the 2 men before the final afternoon session. Bianca brought the message directly to Darian's room because she felt it deserved more than a text. He read it standing at the window with the mountains behind him. He said, "Tell them no." Bianca turned to go. She stopped at the door. She had worked for Darian for 6 years. She had organized his life through Theola's illness, and Theola's death, and Marcus's death, and the months after Marcus's death, when she had sometimes answered his phone for him and made his calls, because he could not. She was not merely an assistant. She was one of perhaps 4 people on Earth who knew most of the real story. Darian, she said, his first name. She almost never used it. He looked at her. Are you saying no because it's the right decision, she said, or because it's the easier one? He didn't answer. She left. The mountains outside the window were completely still. The afternoon light came through the glass, long and golden and patient, the way light is patient in high places, as if it has all the time in the world to illuminate whatever it finds. Darian stood there for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and listened to the voice memo from October 2022, the one about the rooftop. The one that ended with, "I wish she could see this." He listened to it twice. He put the phone back down. He did not call Bianca. Not yet. He spent the rest of that afternoon alone in his hotel room. He did not attend the final session. He did not respond to the 17 messages on his phone. He sat at the small desk near the window, and he did something he had not done since before Marcus died. He opened his laptop and he wrote. Not emails, not memos, not the clean, structured language of business that he had been using for 30 years to make his thoughts presentable for other people. He wrote for himself. Long, unorganized, honest sentences that went nowhere in particular and said things he had not said out loud to anyone. He wrote about Marcus's voice memo. He wrote about the 89 days. He wrote about the morning of February 28th, and the gray light, and the letter, and the 4 careful folds. He wrote about Theola, and the lemon battery, and the laughter that had arrived suddenly in every room she ever entered. He wrote for 2 hours. He did not save any of it. When he was finished, he selected everything and deleted it, and sat quietly for a moment, feeling emptied out in a way that was not entirely bad, like lancing something. Then he opened a new document, and he began to build. What the internet believed had changed on July 13th, 2023, the day after the 12-second video, was the relationship between 2 billionaires. What actually changed was something smaller and larger at the same time. The first thing, Novapulse's stock dropped 4.2% at market open that morning. Investors are fundamentally people who are afraid of things they cannot explain, and a public confrontation between the CEO of a major battery company and the most watched figure in the technology industry was precisely that, something they could not explain and therefore could not price. They sold shares the way frightened people always sell things, quickly, without full information, trusting their fear more than their knowledge. By noon, the stock had recovered 2.8%, as calmer analysts published notes pointing out that Novapulse's fundamentals were entirely unchanged. By end of trading, it sat 0.9% below the previous close. Not catastrophic. Not even particularly significant in the long run, but a signal. The world was watching Darian Voss in a way it had not watched him before, and the world's watching had weight. The second thing, Priya Ose woke up to 14 direct messages from current and former Twitter employees. They had seen the video. They had watched a man in a ballroom full of people who always made things easy for Elon Musk refuse to make it easy. They did not know why he had done it. Yet they did not know about Marcus. They knew only that something had happened that felt like it mattered, in a way that was difficult to articulate but impossible to ignore. Their messages were not coordinated. They did not know each other. They had written to Priya separately, from different cities, at different hours of the night. But they were all saying a version of the same thing, that the layoffs had felt like a door going dark, that they had been given no conversation, no warning, no face looking at them while the decision was made, that watching someone refuse to extend courtesy to the man who had refused to extend it to them had produced a feeling they couldn't quite name. One message from a former Twitter engineer named Cassie Drummond in Seattle said simply, "I don't know who that man is or why he did that, but I watched it 6 times. I think I needed to see it." Priya read every message. She wrote back to everyone. She did not yet know the story she was sitting in the middle of. She only knew it was bigger and different from what the headlines were saying, and that she needed to pull on the thread carefully. She wrote one line in her reporter's notebook that morning, underlined twice. Find out what he's carrying. The third thing, at 2:30 p.m., Elon Musk got into his car. His driver, a quiet and observant man named Pascal, who had been driving him during Sun Valley trips for 3 years and had learned to take silent inventory of Musk's moods, the way sailors read weather, noticed something unusual immediately. Musk did not look at his phone. For the entire 20-minute drive to the airfield, he looked out the window, at the mountains, and at the narrow roads winding between tall trees, at the town moving past, the small storefronts, the people walking dogs in the afternoon sun. The ordinary, unhurried life of a place that existed completely outside the orbit of everything happening on the internet today. Pascal had driven Musk through traffic jams and phone calls and the aftermath of major business announcements. He had never once seen him sit for 20 minutes and simply look at the world going by. On the flight back to Texas, Musk sat with the piece of hotel stationery on the tray table in front of him for a long time. He read what he had written, he revised one line, he folded it. He did not post on X that evening, a silence that his most dedicated followers noticed and commented on. And because a man who averaged over 20 posts a day going quiet felt like a weather change, something shifting in the pressure. In Ann Arbor, Darian arrived home near midnight. He had taken an early flight. He had said nothing to no one. He walked through the house, the kitchen, the hallway, the long corridor that led toward the back bedrooms, and he stopped outside Marcus's door. He put his hand flat against the wood. The paint was cool under his palm. He stood there long enough to feel his own breathing slow and steady. Then he walked to his desk and opened his laptop and wrote the email to his board. 4 sentences. A new initiative. Details in September. Built on work Marcus had begun. It was not a lie exactly. Marcus had not started any formal work. But Marcus had written 9 words in a 4-page letter that were the clearest blueprint Darian had ever been handed. Build a door that doesn't go dark. That was the work Marcus had begun. The building of it was going to be Darian's. He sent the email at 12:47 a.m. Then he closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a while, in the house that held the shape of everyone he had loved. And he felt, for the first time in 8 months and 3 weeks, something that was not quite peace, but was pointed in that direction. Something that felt, faintly and carefully, like purpose. He held onto it the way you hold a small flame in the wind, with both hands curved around it, not squeezing, just sheltering. Careful not to want it too much. Careful not to let the wanting itself blow it out. He did not sleep that night, and he sat at his desk until the sky outside the window began to change. The particular dark blue that comes just before dawn, the color that exists for only a few minutes before the light arrives and erases it. He sat in that blue dark and thought about Marcus, and thought about Theola, and thought about a lemon battery producing 40 seconds of light in his mother's kitchen in Flint, Michigan, and how everything he had ever built had started with that light, and what it meant to him, and what he wanted it to mean to the world. He thought about the 9 words. Build a door that doesn't go dark. Then he opened his desk drawer and took out a fresh legal pad and a pen. A real pen, blue ink, the kind Marcus had always used, and he began to write. Not deleting this time. Not for himself alone. He wrote the outline of something, and the skeleton of an idea that Marcus had handed him, and that he now had to put muscle and bone onto until it could stand on its own and do something in the world. He wrote through the dawn. He was still writing when Bianca arrived at 8 o'clock, let herself in with her key the way she did on the mornings she sensed he needed managing, and found him at his desk in yesterday's clothes with 7 pages of notes and an empty coffee pot and the focused, hollowed-out look of a man who had been working for a long time on something that mattered. She made fresh coffee. She put a cup next to his elbow without a word. She sat at the small table near the window and opened her own laptop and waited. That was Bianca. She understood the difference between a person who needed to be talked to and a person who needed to be accompanied. She had always known which one Darian was. The letter Marcus left was 4 pages long. He had written it by hand, in blue ink, in the neat block letters he had used since middle school. A deliberate, careful handwriting that did not match the speed of his mind, but seemed to be a way of slowing himself down, making himself be precise, making every word earn its place on the page. Darian had read it so many times that the paper had gone soft along its folds. The ink was smudged in 3 places where his fingers had rested during readings he did not remember making. The top right corner of the first page had a small wrinkle that had not been there originally. From the night he had gripped it too hard, 3 weeks after Marcus died, I was sitting in his car in a parking garage in downtown Ann Arbor at 2 in the morning because he had driven somewhere and then been unable to remember where he had meant to go. The letter is private. It belongs to Darian and to the memory of Marcus and to the specific and sacred space between a father and his son that no article or story has any right to fully enter. But in September 2023, standing at a podium at Nova Pulse's Ann Arbor headquarters, in front of a room full of journalists and board members and 1 therapist from Liberty Street and 1 Bloomberg reporter who had filed 4 months of careful work to earn her seat in the front row, Darian Voss read a portion of it publicly for the first time. His voice was steady. He had practiced being steady. And he had stood in his kitchen that morning and read the words aloud to the empty room 6 times until the steadiness was something he could rely on. Not because he wasn't feeling it, because he was feeling it entirely, and he needed to be able to speak through it. He read, "Dad, I know you're going to blame yourself, and I need you to stop right now. You couldn't have caught this. I hid it too well, because I learned from you how to seem like you're holding it together even when you're not." That's not a criticism. That's just the truth about what children learn from their parents, without either of you meaning it to happen. I want to tell you something I've been thinking about for months. There are thousands of people like me in tech right now, but young people who believed in something real and then had it taken away in the worst possible way. Not by failure, not by their own mistakes, but by someone powerful making a decision from very far away, without ever looking them in the face. A laptop going dark, a badge that stops working, like you were never there at all. I don't say this to be angry. I've thought hard about whether I'm angry, and I don't think anger is the right word for what I feel. I say it because I think you are the only person I know who could actually do something about it. Not about what happened to me specifically, about what keeps happening, about the fact that there are people sitting in dark rooms right now feeling what I'm feeling, and there is nowhere for them to go and no one who knows to look. You've always been good at building things, Dad. You built a battery from a lemon when you were 11 years old, and you built a company from nothing, and you built our family into something extraordinary. You built things because you believed that energy was the foundation that everything else stood on. Build something for us. Build it for the people sitting in dark rooms. Build a door that doesn't go dark. I love you. I'm sorry this is the way you're reading this. I kept thinking I would feel better tomorrow, and then tomorrow kept not coming the way I thought it would. You always told me that the right door would open. I believe that. I believed it even at the end. I just couldn't find it in time. Build the door, Dad. Marcus. When Darian finished reading, the room was completely silent. Not the polite, expectant silence of people waiting for the next thing. The real silence. And the kind that falls when something true has been said in a room, and the people in it are feeling the weight of it land on them all at once. Priya Osi was in the front row. She had her notebook open in her lap. She had not written a single word since Darian began reading the letter. She did not write anything now. She simply sat with her hands still and her pen down and let the silence be what it was. 3 people in the room were crying quietly. One of them was Bianca Foley, standing near the back wall, who had held herself together through everything for 2.5 years, with the professional composure of a woman who understood that her job was to be steady, so that her employer could be whatever he needed to be. She had not heard the letter before. Nobody had heard the letter before. Darian stood at the podium and let the silence run its full length. He did not rush it. He did not fill it. He had learned from Theola that some moments needed to breathe before they could become anything else. Then he began to speak about the door. He spoke without notes. He had not prepared remarks beyond the reading of the letter because he had decided weeks earlier that whatever came after the letter needed to come from the place the letter lived. Not from a prepared document, not from language his PR team had reviewed and approved, but from the same honest, unpolished place that Marcus had written from. Anything less would be a betrayal of the thing he was trying to build. He said, "My son was 22 years old. He was the best person I knew. He was smarter than me, funnier than me, and he had more of his mother in him than I ever deserved to watch up close. He believed in technology the way I believed in energy when I was a boy, as a force that could make things better for people who needed things to be better." He went to work at Twitter in August of 2022 with that belief completely intact. He paused. He left in November with his laptop screen gray, and his badge deactivated, and no conversation, and no face, and no human being telling him that what he had contributed mattered. And I need to be honest with you. The layoff did not kill my son. Grief is more complicated than that. And I have sat with grief counselors and read everything I could find, and I understand that. But it was a door going dark, and Marcus was already in a dark place. And one more dark was one more than he could carry. He looked out at the room. He asked me to build a door that doesn't go dark. So that is what I am going to do. The Marcus Voss Foundation for Technology and Mental Health was announced on September 15, 2023. Its mission was precise and practical in the way that Darian built everything. No vague language, no aspirational rhetoric that dissolved when you pressed on it. The foundation would provide mental health support, emergency financial assistance, and career rebuilding resources specifically to young technology workers who had experienced sudden large-scale layoffs. It would fund therapy sessions, real ones, with real licensed therapists, with no wait list and no cost to the recipient. It would provide rent assistance for up to 6 months. It would run career coaching programs and peer support networks staffed by people who had lived the experience, not just studied it. It would operate in San Francisco, New York, Austin, and Seattle, the 4 cities carrying the highest concentrations of laid-off technology workers in the country. It would eventually expand, but it would start where the need was densest and most immediate, because Darian had learned from building Nova Pulse that the fastest way to fail was to try to be everywhere before you had proven you could be somewhere. Its initial endowment was $50 million, every cent from Darian Voss personally. It was the largest individual donation to a mental health-focused initiative in the history of the technology industry. The room received this information quietly, and then not quietly. Yes, a sound moved through it. Not applause exactly, not at first, more like a collective exhale. The sound of people releasing something they had been holding. Then the applause came, and it was the real kind. Not the polished conference room kind where people clap at the right moment because they know they are supposed to. It was uneven and overlapping, and a few people stood before others did, and it built the way real responses build. From the inside out. Darian stood at the podium and did not smile. He was not performing gratitude. He was not collecting the moment. He let the room do what it needed to do, and he stood still and present inside it, the way he had learned to stand inside difficult things. Dr. Fenella Bright was in the room. She was sitting in the third row, beside Joseph Kimmery, the Kenyan infrastructure builder who had shared dinner with Darian on the first night at Sun Valley 4 months earlier. She was a small woman with reading glasses. She kept pushing up her nose, and the careful, watchful expression of someone who spent her professional life listening to what people said and what they meant, and understanding that these were frequently not the same thing. She had agreed to become the Foundation's chief mental health advisor 6 weeks earlier, after a series of conversations with Darian that she would later describe as the most honest conversations she had ever had with a person who was not sitting in her therapy chair. She had seen Marcus twice, in January 2023, and for 2 sessions that had been thoughtful and careful, and during which Marcus had presented as someone who was struggling but managing, someone who had good insight into his own pain, good language for it, which sometimes, she had learned in 20 years of practice, was the thing that made the missing easy. The people who could describe their darkness clearly sometimes convinced both themselves and the people around them that describing it meant they had it contained. She had thought about those 2 sessions every day since February 28th. She had agreed to the Foundation not because it absolved anything, she was too honest a person for that kind of thinking, but because Marcus had been right. There were thousands of people sitting in dark rooms, and she knew how to help people find light switches. That was the work. That was the only answer to the kind of guilt she carried. Not absolution. Work. And then Darian said the thing that nobody in the room expected. He said, "This foundation exists because of my son. It also exists because of a conversation that did not happen in a ballroom in Idaho in July." The room went very still. Everyone in it had seen the video. Everyone knew what he was referring to. "I am not going to explain that moment in detail today," he said. "It was personal. It came from a personal place. But I will say this. What came after that moment, privately and quietly, reminded me of something Marcus wrote in his letter that I did not read to you today." He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He did not take the letter out. He just rested his hand against it briefly, a gesture so small that most of the room missed it. And Priya Osei, in the front row, did not miss it. Marcus wrote that he believed the right door would open, Darian said. He wrote that he believed it even at the end. He just couldn't find it in time. His voice held. "This foundation is the door, and I did not build it alone." He paused. "That is all I will say about that." The room buzzed immediately. Journalists leaned toward each other. Board members exchanged looks. The phrase, "I did not build it alone," landed in the room like a stone in still water, and the ripples went outward in every direction. Nobody knew what it meant yet. Priya Osei wrote 3 words in her notebook, underlined them once, and circled them twice. She had been pulling on this thread for 4 months. She had filed interviews and made calls, and followed quiet leads through back channels. She had been given this press seat because Darian's team had chosen her. Specifically, her, because she had filmed 12 seconds on a phone near a bar, and then spent 4 months trying to understand what she had actually filmed instead of publishing the easy version. She had learned something in August that she had agreed, temporarily, not to publish. She had agreed because Darian had asked her to wait until today. Because the story needed to be told in the right order. Because the door needed to be announced before the person who had helped fund it could be named. She looked down at her 3 underlined, double-circled words. She knew exactly who had helped build the door. And the room was about to find out. Darian reached for the glass of water on the podium. He took one slow sip. He set it down with the deliberate care of a man who was choosing his next words, the way a builder chooses load-bearing material, not for how it looks, but for what it has to hold. He said, "In August of this year, an anonymous donation arrived at Novapulse headquarters. It was directed specifically toward this foundation, before this foundation had been publicly announced, before any of you knew it existed. The donor placed no conditions on the gift. They requested no naming rights. They asked for no press release, no announcement, no acknowledgement of any kind." The room was completely silent. The donation was $25 million. The silence broke, not loudly, more like something cracking along a fault line that had been under pressure for a long time. Journalists sat forward, but someone near the back of the room said something quietly to the person beside them. A board member in the second row looked at another board member with an expression that asked a question neither of them could answer yet. Darian let the room settle. "I am going to respect the spirit of that donation," he said. "I am not going to name the donor today. What I will tell you is what came with the donation. A handwritten note. On hotel stationery." He paused. "I have read that note many times. Like certain other notes I carry, I have read it until the words are memorized. I will not share it in full because it was written privately and sincerely, and those two things deserve to be protected. But I will tell you what it contained." He looked out at the room, at Priya in the front row, at Bianca near the back wall, at Dr. Aunt Fenella Bright with her reading glasses and her careful eyes, at Joseph Kimari sitting straight and still beside her. It contained the name Marcus, he said, written carefully, not in the context of business or reputation or damage control, just the name. And beneath the name, one sentence. He stopped. The room waited. The sentence said, "He deserved better than what I gave him. I am sorry I did not know him in time to do differently." The silence this time was the deepest the room had produced all morning. Deeper than after the letter. Different in quality, not the silence of people absorbing grief, but the silence of people absorbing something more complicated. The specific human complexity of a powerful person who had done a careless and damaging thing, looking at the consequence of it and not looking away. Darian picked up the glass again, set it down without drinking. "That note told me something I had not expected to learn," he said quietly. "It told me that people are capable of seeing things they initially could not see, of understanding the distance between a decision made at a keyboard and a life lived on the other end of it. I do not say this to excuse anything. I say it because Marcus's letter asked me to build something. And you cannot build a door alone. Doors need more than one pair of hands." He reached into his jacket pocket one final time. He did not take out the letter. He placed his hand flat against it through the fabric, the same gesture he had made at Marcus's bedroom door the night he came home from Sun Valley, his palm against the wood, feeling the cool solidity of something that still existed in the world. "Here, Marcus," he said. "This is the door." 3 weeks after the press conference, a package arrived at Novapulse headquarters addressed to Darian Voss. No return address. Inside, a single framed photograph. It was a screenshot of a tweet, posted from Marcus's personal account on September 1st, 2022. His first week at work. First week done. "I work at Twitter now. I can't believe this is my life. Mom, wherever you are, you would have loved the view from the roof." Darian placed the photograph on his desk, to the left of his keyboard, where he would see it every morning before he began work. He never publicly confirmed who sent it. he never had to. The Marcus Voss Foundation opened its doors on September 15, 2023, the same day it was announced. Because Darian had spent 3 months building quietly and completely before saying a single word publicly. In its first 6 months, it served over 4,000 laid-off technology workers. It funded 12,000 therapy sessions. It provided rent assistance to 643 families across its 4 cities. It placed 211 workers in new technology roles through its career rebuilding program. Dr. Fenella Bright oversaw every element of the mental health programming. She brought to it 20 years of practice and the specific motivating weight of 2 sessions in January that she thought about every morning. Joseph Kimari partnered with the foundation to pilot a mental health program for young technology workers in Nairobi and Lagos, which launched in March 2024 and served 900 people in its first 90 days. Priya Osei's long-form piece on the complete story, titled Build the Door, was published in Bloomberg Businessweek in October 2023. It ran to 14,000 words. It became the most read piece in the magazine's history. It won a National Magazine Award the following spring. At the ceremony, Priya thanked a 22-year-old software engineer she had never met, who had left a blueprint in blue ink on 4 pages of paper, in the careful block letters of a person who wanted to be precise. As of the writing of this story, Darian Voss and Elon Musk have not spoken in person. They have not shaken hands. They may never. But $75 million, 50 from a father, a 25 from the person the father could not look at in a ballroom in Idaho, is funding a door that does not go dark. It is funding therapists and caseworkers, and phone lines and rent checks, and the specific, unglamorous, essential work of making sure that young people sitting in dark rooms know that someone knows they are there. That is not absolution. That is not resolution. Life does not tie itself into the kind of bow that makes for a satisfying ending. But it is something. It is a door. It is what happens when grief, instead of staying still, decides to build. And somewhere, in the particular place where a boy who talked in code and laughed his mother's laugh and photographed the San Francisco rooftop on his first week of work, might still be listening. The light is on. It has been on since September 15, 2023. Oh, it is not going dark. Before you go, drop a comment below and tell me where you are watching from. I want to know. Whether you are in a small town or a big city, whether it is morning where you are or the middle of the night, tell me. This community comes from everywhere, and that is one of my favorite things about it. If this story moved you even a little, if it made you think about someone you love, or something you have been carrying, or a door you might still be able to build, please hit the like button right now. It takes 1 second, and it tells the world that stories like this one matter. That kindness matters. That the people we lose are worth talking about. And if you are new here, welcome. This channel is built on one simple idea: that the most powerful stories are the real ones. The human ones, yet the ones that happen in quiet rooms that the news never covers. If that is something you want more of, subscribe right now and join this community. Every single subscriber helps these stories reach someone who might really need to hear them. Spread kindness today. It costs nothing, and it builds everything. Now click on the video appearing on your screen right now, because the next story is waiting. And I promise you, it is worth your time.